From the interior checks, we now move to the front of the vehicle. Initially, we're going to carry out checks to ensure that the lamps, the bumper, the number plates are all nice and secure. Remembering to take a look at the number plates and make sure that it can actually be read. So with your assistance in the car, you can now go ahead and carry out your light check. So can we start with the ignition on, please?
Yes, ignition on.
And the side lights.
Side lights on.
And the headlights.
Headlights on.
Main beam.
Main beam on.
And back to dip beam.
Dip beam.
Can you indicate to your left?
Left indicator.
Now it's important, as they're indicating to the left, that you're looking at the colour of the lamp and that you move around the side to make sure that the side repeater is operating correctly. Now remember, if it's a wraparound lens, you need to stand 1 metre out from the rear wheel, and as long as you can see that light operating, it will pass the test. Okay, indicator to the other side, please.
Indicator right.
Again, light colour and side repeater operation. Okay, this vehicle doesn't have front fog lamps, but if it did, we'd ask the assistant to operate them. We can't fail the vehicle yet because front fog lamps are only testable from the 1st of March 2018, which means really we won't be testing them apart from taxis until 2021. But if they're there, we're going to test them. Right, can I ask you to put the hazard warning lamps on, please? Now, because the hazard warning lamps need to work with the ignition off as well, I'm going to go ahead and ask my assistant to turn the ignition off. So ignition off, please.
Ignition on.
Okay, and turn all lights off apart from the headlamps, please. And step out the vehicle. So it's important to, when you carry out your headlamp beam aim test, that your assistant isn't in the vehicle. So the first stage with the headlamp alignment is to align the test equipment with the vehicle by using a mirror or a laser beam, whichever type you have. We'll then bring the beam setter in line with the headlamp, and we need to measure the height of the headlamp from the ground. So headlamp centre on this particular vehicle, it's around about 70 centimetres. We now adjust the beam setter so it's at 70 centimetres. We now need to ensure that the beam setter is the correct distance from the headlamp light source. On this particular beam setter, it needs to be anywhere between 40 and 50 centimetres. And this one's actually running at around 49 centimetres at this stage. So that's perfectly okay. If needs be, I'd just move the vehicle a little bit further forward. We now need to align the beam setter so it's dead in line with the headlamp, using, in this case, the rifle sight along the headlamp beam setter, or if you have a laser beam, that will be used instead. So now we can look at the beam setter screen and we can decipher whether the headlamp aim is too high, too low, the kick-up's clearly visible on screen, etc. Just remember that if the beam aim is too low, we can go and check the height adjustment switch from within the vehicle and adjust it up slightly. However, we can't do this if the beam aim is too high. And finally, to complete the test, we'll simply move the beam setter across to the other headlamp and test that in the same way. So the next stage now is we're going to go along and we're going to first of all check our wipers, make sure the wiper's nice and secure. We're going to check along the length of the wiper blade as well. Remember, this will only fail if it wasn't adequately clear on the screen. We're going to check the security of the side repeater and the security of the door mirror. As we come down the side now, we're going to open the door, and this is where we're now going to check the structure of the A-pillar all the way down. As we come along the sill, we're going to operate our finger and thumb to ensure that there's no damage to the sill, and we're going to check the hinges just by lifting the door to ensure that there's no excessive play in the hinges. And then we can come on to the seat belts. Our inspection of the seat belt starts by having a good look around the seat belt stalk to make sure that there's no evidence of the pre-tensioner having been activated. We also need to concentrate on the actual structure of the seat, because in this particular instance, and the case in most cars these days, the seatbelt stalk is attached to the seat, so therefore the condition of the seat mounting points and its runners are also a very important part of the test. So making sure that the seat is in its rearmost position, we're going to go ahead first of all and plug in the seatbelt. And then by grasping the seatbelt firmly, we're going to pull on it to ensure that the seatbelt stalk is nicely attached. We're now going to examine all of the seatbelt webbing by pulling it out fully and inspecting it all along its length. Remembering to include the part that disappears down into the vehicle structure. And once you've got the seatbelt fully extended, we must give it a good tug on the upper mounting to make sure it's nice and secure. Now remember, we need to check seatbelt retraction with the seat in its rearmost position and nobody in the seat. So all we're going to do now is allow the seatbelt to retract, which it does fine. We're now going to follow the seatbelt along and down to its lower mounting, where we'll then pull on the lower mounting again to ensure that it's properly secure. Part of the test is where we will pull on the seatbelt and whilst doing so press the release button to ensure that the seatbelt would release if someone was trapped in the case of an overturned vehicle. That completes the front seatbelt check. We must remember also to check this seat for security, and then we'd repeat all of those checks around all of the seatbelts, including the seat security as we go. Okay, so now we're at the rear of the vehicle. Same thing again. We're going to go ahead and check the security of the lights and the bumper and of course the number plate. And then we're going to carry out a complete light check as well. Ignition on, please. And the side lights, please. Okay, that's important when your side lights are on that we go ahead and check the number plate lights as well. Let's have a look up under here. Yes, they both seem to be working okay. So could you go ahead and put your foot on the brake, please? So we're checking all brake lights are working. The mandatory brake lights are obviously the lower ones. In this case, we have got a high level brake light and it's working fine. Could you put the headlamps on and put the rear fog on for me? Okay, rear fog's working perfectly okay. Could you put it into reverse gear for me? That's perfect. Could you indicate to your left and to your right? Okay, could you go ahead and put the hazard warning lights on? And now turn the ignition off. And you can turn all lights off now and take it out of gear for me as well. And the final check, which is often missed by testers, is that we check for the reflectors on the lamps as well. It's built into the cluster, so normally it's not too much of a problem. But just be careful of those vehicles that don't have the reflectors built into the cluster where it's a separate reflector. It must be there. Okay, so next thing we're going to do then is open up the tailgate. With the tailgate open, we're going to go along the top and check the structure of the vehicle around the hinges. And of course, again, just making sure everything's nice and secure. This particular vehicle, we're now going to lift up the floor. There's not a great deal to see on some vehicles. There are access panels which you can open them up. On this particular one there isn't, but we can do a check of the spare tyre here just to make sure it's inflated, it's in good condition. It's not a testable item, but of course we would report to the customer if it was defective. And because it's now part of the test, we'd also check what we can see of the floor, but of course it's probably going to be easier to check from the underside of this particular vehicle. Check the catch, and we can go ahead and close the tailgate down. Moving around, the next test is to now look at the fuel cap. So although we did take this out as part of the pre-check, we didn't check it then. So what we're looking for specifically now is the condition of the seal, which is all in good condition on this particular vehicle. We'll close that up, and then we're on moving around the vehicle. As we move around, remember you're checking for any sharp edges on the bodywork and so on. So with the rear door, again, we're going to have a look at the B panel, back of the B panel, the condition of the hinges. We're going to follow along down the sill, and it's always a good idea to press, particularly where there's plastic panels, just in case you can hear any defects. Up the C pillar, looking at the hinge, and again we want to make sure there's no excessive movement in the door. And then we're on to the rear seat belt, which we'll repeat in the same way as we did on the other side. Now all the same checks have been done to the front A post, sill and B post and the door hinges. We've also checked the seat belt, the seat security. The most important thing now though is we have a look under the dashboard on this side, just in case it has a cross shaft to operate the brakes. This particular vehicle doesn't, so we don't need to do that, but just remember that the mounting points for that cross shaft are all prescribed areas. As we move to complete the walk around check, we're going to carry on and check the security of our near side mirror, side repeater, and finishing off by checking the security of the near side wiper blade and wiper arm and its condition. And the next stage then is to have a look under the bonnet. Now with our under bonnet check, it's important firstly that we do a static check. The main purpose of the static check is to ensure that we can check items without putting ourselves in danger. So if we do need to reach down and use finger and thumb pressure on any of the panels within the bonnet, we haven't got the danger of the engine turning, etc. So start with a fixed position. I'm going to start at the battery here for no other reason than this is a good place to start. Checking the battery security, the condition of all of the wiring around the battery. Whilst I'm here, I can take a look at all of the top of the strut tower to ensure that there's no excessive corrosion. As I move around, I can see engine mountings down there. As I come across the front of the engine, I can see an oxygen sensor there, which is part of the test as well now. Moving around, checking for any obvious oil leaks as we go. All the way around the airbox there, can't see any corrosion. It's difficult to see the top of the strut tower on this particular vehicle, but it's just about visible, and I can see there's no issues with that. We want to be checking also around the master cylinder and the servo, paying particular attention to the level of the brake fluid, which isn't that easy to do, but if we just get the torch down here, we can now see quite clearly there's plenty of brake fluid in there, and the colour of it is indicating that it's in good condition. We can also now see right the way down to the bottom there, the structure of the vehicle. There's no need for me to put hands on there, I can't see any visual corrosion, but I would do so if necessary. As I move across the vehicle, I'm checking for any obvious fuel leaks. I'm also checking to make sure that emission control devices such as the EGR valve that we have here is there and it hasn't been obviously blanked off. On this particular vehicle, the VIN plate is just here, so it's very important now that you do a cross check with your VIN plate to the number that you recorded earlier from the windscreen. Must be the same. Okay, as we go across then, we're just checking the structure of the vehicle and everything looks good. So we've done a complete circular check. The next stage now is to ask our assistant to jump in the car, start the engine up. They're going to rock the steering wheel whilst depressing the brakes, and that's going to allow us to check everything under pressure. Okay, so if my assistant goes ahead and starts the engine. Okay, so if you could put your foot hard onto the brakes for me and give the steering a good rock. Okay, so as the steering is now being rocked, I can have a look at any reaction of the rack mounting there to the bulkhead. There's no movement there. As I move around, I might see any reaction at the top mount there, of which there doesn't appear to be any issues with that. And again, I'm going to go around, because everything's now under pressure, I would like to see any leaks, etc. as we go around. Okay, there's nothing there. I can check, if I can see it, the rack mounting down at the bottom there as well. And of course now, because it's all under pressure, I would be able to see any fuel leaks if there were any. Not forgetting to check all of those brake lines around in and around the master cylinder. This particular vehicle doesn't have ABS, so there's nothing to check there, but if it did, of course, we would be checking that. Okay, you can stop now. The final thing then, obviously, and this vehicle hasn't got it, is to check the under bonnet sound deadening material that's normally placed in around the bonnet there. And we need to check its security. So it's not a problem if it's not fitted, but if it is fitted, it does need to be secure. Okay, so to complete our topside inspection, the final thing to do is to check for the security of the bonnet. Now this comes under the driver's view, so what we need to pay particular attention to is the security of the catch, so any corrosion that's likely to affect the catch there, we need to look at. Obviously we need to check the other part of the catch, and then simply release the bonnet stay and then just make sure that the bonnet does actually close by popping your fingers underneath the end there and just making sure it is nice and secure.